So, wonderful, good afternoon. Let's get started. Everybody can hear me well? Sounds pretty loud, right? Good. So we're on the next topic, and today two major things. Number one, for the first time we're introducing banks properly and what's special about banks. And number two, towards the end we will talk a little bit about Bitcoin as well. Required reading, so the new chapter is uploaded, chapter 3. This one I haven't uploaded yet, so I have to double check because it's 2014. And with Bitcoin, there's lots of changes. Thank you very much. Yes. So, if stuff like that happens, always yell in between. Thank you very much. It's taking forever. There they are. Good. So today we talk about banks. ADI, Australian Deposit Taking Institutions, is another word for that. So we see this one very often today, and Bitcoin. This reading is uploaded already. This one not yet, because I want to double check that 2014 is still okay. So today we will make a major distinction between two different kinds of money, central bank money and private money. What that is, you will see on later slides. What's special about banks? I said that already. This one you can highlight already here. Banks create money. So that will be the special part of today's lecture. And not only of today's lecture, that is one of the very, very core topics and important things to understand for the whole class, that banks can create new deposits. That's going to be super important for the whole class. And we talk a bit about Bitcoin. So one major misconception that people have from the general public, but also from first-year textbooks, for example, first-year macroeconomic textbooks, is the following idea, that banks do the following. Somebody is bringing cash to the bank, which is then becoming a deposit, and this cash is then lent out via loan to other people. And whilst that is possible, it is not really what banks are doing, right? Just think very practical, for example. If you're getting a mortgage, $500,000, do you think that's going to be paid out in cash? Very unlikely, right? So what banks are dealing with is usually electronic money, not cash money. Right? What we see and feel sometimes that the ATM is cash, but the cash on the total balance sheet of a bank is like this much, while the balance sheet is this big. So it's the tiniest amount that banks deal in cash. Right? So this is not really a good way to think of this one. A much better way to think of deposits and loans is the following. I go to the bank and ask the bank for a loan. They check my background, check what kind of job I've got, what kind of income I've got, and they figure out, yes, we want to give you a loan. And what they simply do is they press a button on the computer, and the button is then resulting in me getting a loan, or loan is being booked here on the bank asset side, $500,000. Axel owes us $500,000. And at the same time, they also say, well, we also owe Axel $500,000. So they just put $500,000 on both sides of the balance sheet. No cash involved whatsoever. They don't have to pay out cash, and they don't have to collect cash beforehand. They just make a double entry on the bank's balance sheet. And we can see here the bank thereby created new deposits. These deposits weren't around beforehand. And if you had macroeconomics, in macroeconomics we have so-called base money and then M1. So part of M1 is deposits. So what happened here now is the total amount of money in the economy has increased without the central bank doing anything. So that's what's meant by banks can create deposits. Banks can create money, or sometimes we see in the news that banks can create millions of dollars just by a press of a button. That's exactly what happens when they do the double booking with loans and deposits on both sides. Good. So this will be lots of stuff today running in the background, exactly that idea. So what else do we have here? We talked lots about Australian deposit taking institutions, ADIs. I often will say simply banks. Right? So banks is just slang for Australian or authorized deposit taking institutions in Australia, ADI. And they are majorly important for the payment system. We already had that in past classes, that if you transfer money from one person to the next, it usually just transfers via the booking on the bank's liability side, so the deposits are changing names. That's what we play around with a little bit today too. Just at this time, we focus much more on the banks themselves. So what do you have here? We've got also something else than normal deposit. We've got so-called central bank deposits. So I will sometimes say RBA. RBA is the Reserve Bank of Australia. Might be worth writing down if you don't know that by heart. So Reserve Bank of Australia. And that is Australia's central bank. Central banks are very special. So what's so special about central banks? Central banks are the only unit that is allowed to create basically what we call money. So they are the ones that are allowed to print cash notes, for example. Step one. So a central bank is the only unit that is allowed to create cash notes. And we will see in a second they can create the electronic equivalent of cash notes as well. If a bank has an account at their central bank, just as we have an account at our bank, and they have funds on it, these accounts are called exchange settlement accounts, ESA accounts. And if they have a positive statement on their ESA account, so just as if you have a positive deposit, a bank can have a positive deposit at the central bank, that is called then exchange settlement fund. We'll see in a second why it's called exchange settlement fund. But just a little bit of introduction of these terms. ESA and ESF. Sometimes I might use them interchangeably as well. By the way, in the US, the same thing is called the US Fed, by the way. I already said it. So in the US, the central bank is called the US Fed, the Federal Reserve System. And if an American bank has a positive account statement at the US Fed, it's called Fed funds. And there's one very important interest rate in the world, or one of the most important ones, and it's the so-called Fed funds rate. So we will have something on slides later that is called the so-called cash rate. That is the interest rate that the RBA is setting. And the same rate in the US is called the Fed's funds rate. So you can imagine it for the time being, simplified, that is the interest rate of the central banks. By the way, here I started making some exclamation marks onto it. So of course, all slides are important, but some slides are even more important than other slides. So these things, these terms and all that stuff, very important. You don't need to understand it yet, but by the end of the class, hopefully you do fully understand it. Types of money. So what do we have here? Cash. And we introduce some symbols. So these symbols will rock up on future slides all the time. So cash is symbolized simply by this picture of cash, notes and coins, self-explanatory. Then we've got so-called central bank deposits, or I will sometimes call these reserves. Might be worth writing that down too. Reserves. And they have the same idea. They're the equivalent of cash and coins, just in electronic form. Just as for us, a bank deposit is the same as having cash in our wallet. Like I can go shopping either with my cash or I can go shopping with my card, with my bank deposit. So banks can either use cash or central bank money, you might call that one, central bank deposits. And then we've got private bank deposits. That's what everybody knows already. That's what you've got on your bank, so-called private money. Maybe doing a little bit more here. So these two are also called outside money. I'll give you a little bit more information that might link up to what you might hear in other classes. that's not really on. Sorry, it's which one? Thank you. This is what in terms of like 2. Just by the way. So this one here can also be called outside money, and this one is called inside money. Now, why is that? These type of monies here, the central bank has full control over it. The central bank is the only unit in the economy that is allowed to create new coins and new notes. Nobody else is allowed to print new cash. If you go with some cash to the copy machine, try to copy it, and they catch you, you're in big trouble. Right? That's not allowed. Also, the central bank is the only one that can create these central bank deposits. Nobody else can create central bank deposits. So basically, the central bank is fully in charge of these two types of money. So there's outside control of this money. And that's different to this type of money. We've learned just beforehand, banks can create deposits. And how much deposits banks create is not directly controlled by the central bank. Banks themselves decide. Banks together with us decide. If you just think about it, in my example beforehand, when I go to the bank and ask for a mortgage, it's not that my bank has to ask the central bank, are we allowed to give us a mortgage? If they want to, they just do it. And similarly, if I and none of you is going to the bank and ask for mortgages, then the banks cannot create new mortgages. If they don't have clients asking for a loan, they can't just make up new loans either. So this amount of money here, the bank deposits, they are basically decided by us inside of the economy. There's no outside control of how much of that money is. That's the reason why we call this one outside money, inside money. Good. What else do we have here? Might be a bit better if I'm going back onto this one. That's not showing. Settlements. So here I should say maybe a slight distinction that I like to do is payments is coming into 2 steps. So first we acknowledge that we have to make a payment, and the second step is that we do pay, and then we call it settled. So if we have something settled, it means we're totally finished. If I promise you to pay you $5 tomorrow, and I give you $5 tomorrow, then we're settled. Right? You don't have any more rights or claims against me. Normal people, households, companies, pretty much everybody in the economy is happy to get deposits. Right? So if I sell a car to you and you send over to me $5,000 on my deposit account, I'm perfectly happy and we are settled. I can't come to you in the next day and say, listen, I didn't want to get $5,000 in deposits, I want to have 3 cows and 1 sheep, or I want to have US dollars, or I want to have Bitcoins. No, in Australia usually most people do happily accept deposits, and as soon as they get their deposit, as soon as they get their number on their deposit account, the debt is settled. We are done. That makes France so good, right? What do we have here? So banks are basically keeping a record there. We see that in step 2. We do this practical as well. It's a little bit easier. So let's see, we do things always in 3 ways. So we do the intuition, we do a nice picture like this, and then we do the accounting as well for everything that we do. Let's take an example. I pay my mobile phone bill, or in this case here it's Will. Will is paying his mobile phone bill. let's see what happens here. So on Will's account, bank account, the deposits go down. So he's kind of sending deposits over to the mobile phone provider. Right? So it's going off his deposit account, $45 minus, and the mobile phone provider gets $45 plus. So these two are settled. Makes sense, right? So once you pay your mobile phone bill, you're done. You don't have to do anything else with the mobile phone. But here's something special happening. Will's account is at bank B. The mobile phone account is at bank C. Now bank C is not going to accept a deposit account at bank B. Remember, Will is at bank B. So in theory, what you might say is, okay, let's give these other names. ANZ, Westpac. So ANZ says, okay, we take $45 off the deposit account of Will. So deposit account Will minus $45. And then we just give the deposits to Westpac. So we just make a deposit account for Westpac. Westpac, we owe now $45. And there I say it already. Remember, banks' deposits are for bank A, asset or liability. If you make the account statement, on which side is it? The asset side or the liability side deposits? I hear both of it, assets and liabilities. That is super important. Just talk to your neighbor for 1 minute, turn around, talk to whoever it is, just exchange if it's an asset or a liability. And I can see some people don't have neighbors, right? That makes that hard. Let's move closer together. Nobody's fighting. Happy. So, thank you for chatting with your neighbor. What did we figure out? Is it an asset or liability? Just yell in whatever you think. Liability this time is more. Good, right? So, if you have a deposit at your bank, the bank is owing you something. And now we can see here too why bank B and bank C, we can't just fix it by saying Westpac is getting a deposit at bank B. Because that would mean that, or ANZ here, that means that ANZ is owing something to Westpac. Bank B is still owing something to Bank C if they were making a deposit account here. And if I owe something, am I settled yet? No, I still have to settle. So Bank B somehow has to settle Bank C. They can't do that with deposits. They have to do it somehow differently. They have to give Bank C something that Bank C wants. And Bank C says, yes, now we're settled. Now I leave you alone. And now I acknowledge that I now owe my mobile phone company something. And that's the reason why banks have settlement accounts at the central bank. They are for settling between different banks. Banks settle their debt between each other, what they owe each other, via their exchange settlement accounts. So an exchange settlement account is an account at the central bank, and banks are happy with not inside money, but outside money. Remember, cash is where on the bank's balance sheet, asset or liability? Cash is an asset. Cash in gold is an asset, unlike deposits. Deposits are liability. I know if you've never done that before, it's a bit confusing. Deposit means that they owe us, they owe the customer something. If they have cash in a vault, it's an asset for them that is sitting there. Right? The two are related but separated. So banks see cash as an asset, but banks also see central bank deposits as an asset, so-called reserves or ESF. And now Bank B can use its central bank deposits to settle with Bank C. So they sent over electronic money on the RBA account to the other bank. We see that in the second in detail. So that is the second part. So what is actually useful information maybe? So the blue part is settlement between households. So we've got households. We've got the household bill is settling with the mobile phone company. And the mobile phone company is perfectly happy getting a deposit, getting a liability of Bank C. The mobile phone company doesn't need to have cash or central bank reserves, they're happy with deposits. But the banks between each other, they can settle only via exchange settlement funds. So that's the first thing that we have to get out of that one. Banks do business between each other. They settle between each other with exchange settlement funds. Private people can settle and pay each other via bank deposits. Step one. Now we look at the same thing here. Let's see what happens here. So sometimes, even I sometimes say we send over deposits, but that's not really what's happening because deposit is a liability. What really is happening here is that for the first bank, they write down, well, the $45, we don't owe Will anymore $45. Will has transferred $45 to the mobile phone company. So his deposit account, his liability with our liability with Will is going down by minus 45. But therefore Bank B, so they're destroying this deposit with Will. Don't take it too literally. So deposits go down. But therefore Bank B has to pay something to Bank C. They have to settle with Bank C, and they do that via their central bank deposits. And actually add, let me see, do we have accounting here? We have this accounting there too, but I put it into this picture, then you can imagine it better. Is that big enough? No, it's not even on the screen. Wait a second. So the RBA. Again, if Bank B has an account at the RBA, would that be for the RBA a liability or an asset? I give you a hint. The central bank, the RBA, is called Bank of Banks. If you have a deposit at your bank, it's a liability or an asset for the bank? Liability. I've put some assets here and there, right? That's what we did just before. It's a liability that has to get into your head, right? Bank deposits are liabilities for banks. Now, if the Bank of Bank is having a deposits account, so if the Bank B has a deposit account at the RBA, for Bank B, it's going to be an asset. Sorry, that was a trick question. But for the RBA, it's going to be then liability. There it is, right? So here are all these F funds on that side. ESF, so we have B and C. And what's happening here now, when bank B wants to settle with bank C, minus 45 plus 45. Just as Will is transferring something to the mobile phone company, bank B can transfer something to bank C. But they need to transfer central bank money, exchange settlement funds, not deposits. Good, so once I've done that, or basically all these things go today, nowadays it's taking almost 2 days time, but you can imagine it's going all at once in the future, actually very near future. So now bank C has received these 45 on their RBA ESF account. They're happy about that one. So that's good. So their assets is going up by 45. But at the same time, they have to acknowledge they owe now the mobile phone company $45 more as well. Right? They just didn't get that as a present. That was basically a reimbursement so that they do create a new deposit for the mobile phone company, because otherwise Will and the mobile phone company here, that settlement wouldn't have worked. So that's basically what happens every time if you transfer money to another bank. Your deposit account goes down, the other deposit account goes up, and in the background the banks settle with each other via the exchange settlement funds. That's super important. Good, here we've got the same thing for all the balance sheets. So bank B, deposits go down, so their liabilities go down, but at the same time they settle with the other ones, so their assets at the RBA, their ESF account, their ESA account is going down too by 45. Remember, balance sheet always balanced, so now both is balanced. We can see that here, maybe linking these up too. So let's call this one 1. And that is linked up with this one, 1. And then we've got 2. So bank C is acknowledging that they're getting something, and they're acknowledging that the deposit account should go up of the telecom company, and at the same time they get the settlement from bank B, which is this one here. Everybody on board? So this whole thing is just one transaction, one deposit transaction. And now, of course, it looks a little bit as if deposits moved over from here to there. But the deposits are liability, they can't really move in that sense. So what we really did is we reduced liabilities here and we increased liabilities there. Now, a bit abstract, but we practice that heaps today. So let's see what we have. ADA, so bank's income with non-ADAs. What do we mean by this one? For whatever reason, a bank gets paid something by a non-bank. How we take care for that? Let's see. We've got 2 different banks now. We've got Smart Bank and My Bank. So for whatever reason, I have to pay Smart Bank something, and I just made reason up. So I got fantastic financial advice from Smart Bank. They gave me recommendations, and I have to pay a fee for it. So if I have to pay a fee, what happens to my deposit account? Goes down. Whenever you pay something, your deposit account goes down. Right? Now, but the deal was with another bank, so somehow the other bank must get something. There's 2 things. Number one, because they're collecting a fee, is that going to be good or bad for their profits? Good, right? So that's income, and if you have accounting beforehand, we can straight away say they kind of made a profit, so their profits are increasing, or you can say the equity is increasing. Right? But that is not an asset, it just means here on the liability side, they've got more equity, right? More profits. And where are these profits or money coming from? Basically, I told my bank to push money over to Smart Bank. And remember, between 2 different banks, settlement always happens with exchange settlement funds. So my bank now has to reduce its exchange settlement funds. They're basically telling the RBA to push money over to Smart Bank, and Smart Bank's exchange settlement funds go up. So that's how it looks like if this bank here gets income from a non-customer. I was not a customer at SmartBank. I was banking with ADI here. So far so good. So now we do the same thing again with the other pictures. I was the payer here. I was trying to pay that other bank. My bank deposit got destroyed, so my bank deposit went down. Remember here, minus deposits. Let's just put numbers to it. $100. So my account goes down by 100. The bank here makes 100 profits, and these profits are being basically transferred via ESF here. Now maybe try this one very quickly with your neighbor. And I'm quite sure it's somewhere on the slides too, but it's better if you figure that out yourself. So we have SmartBank, and we have, let's just call this one ADI. ADI. So what happens with the ESF account? The ESF account of the ADA and the ESF account of SmartBank. What are the changes there? Just do that very quickly with the neighbor. So basically we want to depict the green part here on the balance sheet of the RBA. Now's a good time to have some chit-chat. So, very good. So basically, most people got that one, right? So SmartBank, of course, has here the plus 100. The ADI has the minus 100 here. Trick question. Total amount of deposits in this economy, did they change? I have to scratch my head for a second there too. Let's see. These deposits went down. Anywhere else deposits went up. You can also use this picture. Bank deposits destroyed. Anywhere bank deposits had been created? No. There's no new deposits anywhere. So what we can see here is the total amount of money, M1 in macroeconomics, all of a sudden went down. By the way, did you have macroeconomics already? Some? Right? You had monetary policy, that's what we do much later, but we can see here, the central bank didn't do anything. They didn't do any kind of monetary policy. Still the amount of money in the economy changed. inside money changed. Deposits changed. What happened to outside money? Did cash change in this economy? Did I do anything with cash? Did I burn notes or hammer down on coins? No, nothing, right? I didn't make new notes or coins either. Did the exchange settlement fund change in total? If you look at all exchange settlement funds, did they get bigger or smaller? Stay the same? Stay the same. We just changed the names. Right? So outside money didn't change in our example. Good. Let's do another example. Income from a customer. So this time I have my bank account simply at my own bank, and my own bank is providing me advice. Or, for example, I have to pay just the annual account fees. Now, if I pay, or if you pay annual account fees, what's happening to your deposit account? Up or down? Are you happy to pay fees or unhappy? Some people are happy when it's done with, but I think usually you're unhappy, right? So you don't like paying fees, but you have to. So the deposit account is going down. Your deposit account is going down. The bank, happy or unhappy to get the fees? Happy, of course, right? So their profit's going up. But here's the interesting part. There's nothing on the asset side happening here. There's no cash coming in or no exchange settlement funding coming in. They simply say, okay, we used to owe Axel a certain amount of money, but now we owe him simply less. But therefore we made profits. That's all that's happening here. Good. What else can we take it off? That's the same idea. So we always make different agents. So now I settled with my own bank. I paid the fees, and thereby bank deposits simply got destroyed. What else do we have here? So the bank is issuing financial instruments and buying financial assets. So it's getting harder and harder and harder, right? So there's two things happening. Let's see how we can make that. This is the bank. So they're issuing a financial instrument. What does that mean, issuing financial instrument? Remember the bond I had in week 1? So they're just creating a bond. They're just writing a piece of paper, and whoever buys that piece of paper gets the promise that the bank will pay a certain amount of coupon and in the future pay the face value back. That's made very simply. They promise within a year they're going to pay $1,000 back. So they can write here $1,000 in liability, of course. That's a promise, right? And they gave that promise to somebody else. This guy here, the investor, he bought that promise. Now, if the investor is buying that promise, what's happening on his deposit account? Kind of says on the slide, right? So if you buy something, your deposit account goes down. But now again, the trick is this bank here is different to this. Let's call these again. This is bank B, and this is bank C. So bank B, of course, doesn't want to have a new account, a liability of bank C. They want to see outside money. And the typical outside money they want to see is a central bank deposit. So bank C has to transfer some of its exchange settlement funds over to bank B. And I always find it nice and easy to see it on the same picture. So at the RBA, B, ESF, C, ESF. So let's see, C is kind of paying B or settling with B. So C, ESF is going down, B, ESF is going up. So you can see it's almost the same story, right? The logic is always the same, but sometimes there's slight variations because here, for example, nothing happened on the asset side. Everything happened only on the liability side with its own customer. There was a deal with the own customer. Here we have a deal with a customer from another bank. So things happen on two sides of two banks, and in fact of a third bank too, of the RBA as well. So it really always depends upon where are the different actors sitting and what kind of financial transaction do we do. Don't try to memorize, because you can make, I don't know, we've got here examples, I reckon easily 10 examples, and you can easily make 20 more examples. So don't try to memorize every single example, try to understand really what's going on. And the simple things that happen here is always balance sheets need to be balanced. That's the first rule. Second rule is you have to think of what's changing, liabilities or assets, right? You can either just have a swap on the liability side, you can have a swap on the asset side, or you can have both of them going down, or both of them, going down, or both of them going up. So you have to think what makes sense. Then we can settle between each other simply via deposits, but banks settle between each other always via ESF. So with this system, you can solve all kinds of problems. So don't get all freaked out that there's so many different possibilities. Right? You just have to figure out the system, and then you're all fine. It should be easy. Good. Got that one. Let's do the same thing in pictures again. So we've got three actors here. Four if we include the central bank. So we've got the payer, who's the investor who's buying the bond. The bond is freshly created by that bank. The bank was called Bank B in the picture beforehand. And this one was Bank C. So we are creating a new financial instrument, give that one to the payer, but the payer now to the investor has to pay for it. He orders his bank to pay Bank B. So his bank deposit is going down, it's being destroyed. Liabilities of Bank C are being destroyed. And Bank C is settling with Bank B by pushing over ESF. So what else we have here? Private money is destroyed. So inside money, less. Deposits went down, nowhere deposits went up. Central bank money has been just changing names. I think we've got the accounts. Do we have accounts for that one? Oh, the accounts with you. Good, so next thing. Issuing a financial instrument to our own customer. Now that's much easier, right? So if I give my customer a new liability, a bond, and my customer is paying for it with his own deposits, we just change the name of that liability. Right? So instead of saying, okay, Axel has $1,000 deposits on his deposit account, I owe, as a bank, I owe Axel $1,000. I give Axel a fresh piece of paper, a bond, which says $1,000 bond. That's a new financial instrument here. I give that to Axel, and Axel is paying with it, with his deposit, so the bank doesn't owe Axel the $1,000 deposit. So we just changed the name of that financial instrument. It's not a deposit anymore, it's now a financial instrument. And no other bank, no RBA, nothing else is involved in it. And this is maybe somewhat interesting here. See, teaching always can learn something new a little bit too. Usually, when a company is issuing bonds, we say the company is doing that to raise funds. That's what we had in week 2. Companies are issuing equity and bonds to raise funds. In this example here, the bank didn't get any new funds in at all. All that happened is there was a change in liabilities. Just a louder? I have a feeling there was a question somewhere. That looks like it, right? So the liability decreased. But remember, the bank gave me a bond. And the bond for the bank is a liability. So what we have here is, I make numbers, it makes life easier. My deposits went down by 1,000, but bank bonds, which are here in liability, went by 1,000. So it's just a swap. It's a bit weird, right? I have to admit, it doesn't come easily over my tongue either. If a bank is issuing bonds, it's, in this example here, not getting any additional funds. Note the difference to this one here. Here the bank was also issuing bonds, but the investor who bought this bond was not in the bank itself. It was somebody at another bank. And here we actually did get an additional asset. And here comes, if this is not confusing enough, right? Here comes an extra interesting part. If a bank is issuing bonds, do they know beforehand who's going to buy them? No idea. So it could be that this is happening, or it could be that That is happening. Right? Afterwards you can know, right? Afterwards you realize, okay, our deposits are changed, or we have ESF coming in. But beforehand, or in the moment when you're selling bonds, you don't know for sure. Now, does that mean that for a bank it's useless to issue bonds? No. Because deposits, how long do you have to wait till you can get deposits out of an ATM? What's your right as a customer? Anytime, right? So they're at call. If you have a bond that runs for 1 year, when can you get your money back then from the bank? 1 year, right? So it's not that you changed only names, as I just said beforehand. There's also a difference. This one is due any day, the deposit. These are due whenever the bond is due. So you change the timing of your liabilities, which by itself is important, but not for today's. Just in case that you wonder what the heck is going on here, right? So the timing is going to be different. Good. Speaking of timing, I better watch it too. What else we here? Same thing as the picture. So the bank is creating a new financial instrument, the bond, or we might do it with equity too. And if the investor is at the same bank, they're just paying by saying, okay, you don't owe me that much anymore. So bank deposits go down or are destroyed. Good. Term deposit. So that's even easier, really. So if I decide, okay, I don't want to have my money on a deposit account, I'm pushing it onto a savings account or a term deposit. What is changing for the bank? Well, my deposit account is going down. At the same time, the term deposit account is going up. And again, the only real change here is the timing. Term deposits are not due immediately. They're due after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the time is. No new money collected. Good. What else do we have here? Investing in financial instrument issued by non-customer. Okay, so it's investing. Beforehand, we had the bank was issuing bonds. Now the bank is buying a bond, right? In the market, in the financial market. And it's buying the bond from a non-customer. I'm thinking if I should change the order slightly. Surely we've got that same thing for customer as well. Oh, we don't. Would have been easier just from customer. Good. Anyway, so the bank, we're talking about this bank here. So they are buying bonds. Now, if they're buying bonds from other banks, other corporations, that's going to be then for them asset, right? So they don't owe other people money. They bought the bond. They gave other people money. They own the bond now, so assets go up. Now somehow they have to pay the other side, and because it's a non-customer, they can't just say, okay, we create a new deposit here. Deposit for, let's say I bought it off ANZ. Because what's ANZ going to say then? Are they happy to get a liability of ADA Bank? No, right? Because that would mean that ANZ has still the right to get something from them. And most likely banks don't give each other money for free, right? They're not going to say, yes, sure, we are happy with the deposit account, don't give us anything interest-free, we don't earn any interest, we don't mind, right? That's never going to happen. So the other bank or the other investor wants to be paid, and they want to be paid not in deposits, but as we said, they settle always via ESF, central bank money. So this is not correct. So at the bank of the issuer now, the issuer is getting the payment. So let's say AXA. It's much easier. AXA was selling a bond. To this bank, Bank B. And therefore Bank B somehow has to settle with me. Just imagine, so before we said for the bank, the bond is an asset. For me, the bond was an asset too, but I give it away. Right? So for me, the asset is going down in that sense. My T account, by the way, is not here. But if I give the bond away, I want to receive in return payment. And because I'm a private household, I'm perfectly happy receiving deposits. So if my bank is telling me, yes, your deposit account is going up, I'm happy, I'm settled. But my bank is only willing to say, yes, we owe Axel more money if they received that first from Bank B. So Bank B and this bank, my bank, have to settle via their ESF. Now let's get a little bit feedback, because you might notice this is now the 6th or 7th time that we do something with central bank accounts and with these T accounts, and I go faster and faster and faster. And I see more and more either bored or shocked faces. So for me, it's very hard to tell if I should do it more detailed and slower, because it's hard to understand, or if I should go even faster. So just make it a hand of signs maybe for waking up. If you put all your hands up, then nobody needs to be embarrassed that they're raising their hand. Thank you. Just check your neighbor if they've got their hands up or if they're sleeping or playing with their phones. Yeah, lots of group pressure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now let's put one arm down if I am going too fast. So just put one arm down if I'm going too fast, then I get rid of the feeling. Okay, there's plenty of two arms up. Let's well mix. Okie dokie. So I go a tiny bit slower because I don't want to lose anybody. It's your job a little bit, if you have got a feeling I go too fast, just interrupt me. I'm here to help you. It's not that I'm here to entertain myself and just to get the stuff off my chest, right? So the whole point of the class is that you get an understanding of these things. Good, I don't want to repeat this one yet. I'm just doing the next one a little bit slower, and then we have a break anyway. So, investing in a financial instrument issued by a customer. Ooh, that's interesting too. So in this case here, a customer is issuing a financial instrument. Let's say, for example, we've got I've got a company and I'm issuing a financial instrument. I'm issuing bonds, for example. When I issue bonds, not sell bonds, but issue, I create a new bond and issue it. For me, is that a liability or an asset? Liability. So, bonds plus. What's the whole point of me issuing bonds? I issued bonds because I want to get after their deposits or cash, so I want assets in, right? Funding in plus. So that's for me on the asset side. If you think really, really simple, cash, but really bonds are never sold for cash, right? So, and because I'm a company, I'm a non-bank, right? Then I'm happy to accept deposits. So far, so good, right? So I issue bonds to get funds in for me, deposits in. Now here in the heading it says, so financial instrument was issued. That is this part here, a newly created bond. And we call this one here 1. And the payment, should we make that one 2? Yeah, let's do it here 2. So this, no, let's call it, yes, it needs to be balanced. Let's call this one 1, 2. So now I issued the bond, I got paid. But of course the payment needs to rock up somewhere else too. The bank was investing in this one. And it was by its own customer. Because I happen to have my deposit account at this bank. So how are they going to pay me? Simply they say my deposit account is going up. Right? So this is basically, and at the same time they bought of course the bond that I issued, and that now that bond, because I give it to the bank, is for the bank, and on the bond it says my name, Axel. That's not their own bonds that they're buying back, so that's an asset for them. So that's the bond here. Now why is this case somewhat interesting? They created new deposits here. I think yes, it's a main kick out of this one. And we basically have created new money, fresh money. Anything else I want to get out of this? I think that's good enough. Make sense? Just give me a little bit of a nod, or if lots of people go like this, then I'm happy to try it in slightly different words. Good, loan. So that's the standard one what banks, of course, do, right? So I go to the bank, ask for a loan, and the bank says yes. So they just say, Axel gets a loan, but I'm not really getting a loan. What I'm really getting is the deposit here. That's what I wanted, right? I want a higher amount on my deposit account so I can go shopping for housing. So the bank is creating just a new asset, the loan with my name on it, and also says we owe Axel now the deposits by the same amount, and that's the typical deposit creation. I made here exclamation marks because that happens all the time. Every time you go to the bank and ask for a loan, that is what happens. Anybody of you has an overdraft at the bank, or ever heard of overdrafts? Where you're spending money that is not even on your deposit account, where your deposit account looks like it's going into the minus. Trick question, how would that look like? If your deposit account is going into the negative, it's an asset, exactly. It's for the bank, it's an asset. It's the same as if they gave you a loan. Same idea. Good. I think now it's the natural time for a break. So what we do next is we look at the stuff that we did last week, where non-banks, so firms and households, interact with each other, and then we check what's happening in the banks at the same time due to these non-bank interactions. But let's take a 10-minute break first. Well deserved. I just turn down the microphone. Back on. So the thing you might realize, it's sometimes a bit confusing, takes time, read the titles, you have to somehow translate into, so how many parties are involved in there, how many different balance sheets might we have, what's going on, right? So it's not all super easy, and it just takes practice. So if you're a little bit shocked here and there, that's fine. Now if you don't understand anything, that's not so good, then talk to me after class, right? And I'll try to fix up some things too. Good, let's play around with these a little bit more. Now we have non-bank intermediary. Okay, an intermediary was just like an in-between party, like a reseller. And this intermediary here, let me see where the intermediary is. The intermediary is the finance company. And that's what the finance company is doing. They're raising funds to lend funds. So they're just getting, say it's simplified, money in, money out. That is what an intermediary is doing, collecting on one side, giving it out on the other side. What are they doing here? In this example here, they're issuing commercial papers. That's the reason why it's a liability for them. So they're creating a new commercial paper, issue it, sell it to somebody, and they get paid for it via bank deposits. That is the plus here. So that is action number 1. Issuing a commercial paper, getting paid for it via the bank deposits. And now we have to check which bank this deposit is in. So the finance company has its own home bank. And the finance company in this example here is, do we have that one? Oh, we skipped that on this graph. Let me see. Let's say the finance company is having an account here at Bank Z, I call it now, so we don't mix it up with all the other banks. Bank Z. So what do we have happening here? The finance company is receiving deposits. Deposits for them is an asset. For its bank is, of course, as always, a liability, right? Plus. Now somehow Bank Z is not just saying, okay, our liability is going up. Remember, we always need to have a balanced balance sheet. And so what can happen is that the guy that bought these commercial papers initially here, right, let's just draw somebody, that's the savings unit, this one here, right? He might be at Bank Z, then it would be nice and easy, we just subtract it from his deposit account and plonk it onto the deposit of the financial company. Don't copy that down and just make the easiest case. So I'd say he has actually a bank account here. Then I would just make it like this. This deposit down, that deposit up, done, that part. But I want to make it a little bit more trickier so it links up with these. I'm just saying this person here, the savings, surplus savings unit, is sitting at a different bank. It's sitting at bank, let's call these banks, give them more names, Bank B, Bank C. So he's sitting at Bank B. So he bought the corporate bond, and somebody over there told me I should always do all balance sheets. So unfortunately it's getting even fuller now, right? So the balance sheet of this one, let's just say it's me. I squeeze my balance sheet here. You don't have to copy it down, it's just if it helps you. So for me, what happened is the following. I was buying that commercial paper. When I buy commercial papers, for me it's an asset, thank you. So commercial paper plus, and I paid for that commercial paper via my bank deposits. my bank deposits for me as private person, just as for you as private people, is an asset. Thank you. So Axel is done. Right, so that's all part 1. But now my bank deposits went down. Somehow Bank Z, who's saying that financial company has now more deposits at it, needs to be reimbursed. They need to be reimbursed by Bank B because I transferred money to Bank Z onto the deposit account of finance company when I bought the bond. Two different banks. How do they deal with each other always? Via ESF, right? So Bank B is using its ESF account at the RBA. Gosh, it's getting harder and harder, isn't it? So at the RBA, Bank B, ESF, down. They transferred it to Bank Z. ESF up. So Bank Z, ESF here is of course on the asset side, plus. So what I've written down now is all 1, 1. That was the first part. So we have now the finance company actually sold the bond to me. I got the bond. I transfer deposits over to finance company. Finance company is acknowledging that they get the bonds, the deposits. Bank Z acknowledges that their deposit account went up. Bank B still has to somehow settle with Bank Z. They do it via ESF. That's a minus sign here, so it's also a 1. And we can see the booking at the RBA accounts that Bank B, ESF goes down, Z, ESF goes up. So now the first part of that story is completely finished. That was this part, number 1. Everybody on board, just give me like a nod. Right? So you don't have to copy all the other ones down, but maybe it helps. Now comes the second part. The finance company is lending these deposits to somebody else. So their deposits are going down. That's the minus part here, 2. If their deposits go down, Bank Z says, okay, you have less deposits now. And now it depends upon who they lend that money to. If they lend it to somebody who has an account at Bank Z, it's quite easy. Then you just would increase the deposit account of that other person. Let's say Lily, the lender. So Lily is getting all that money too. So this is Axel, was me. That is Lily. So if Lily has its bank account at Bank Z, we would simply say plus deposits Lily so and so much, and then we are done. But we make it tricky. We say Lily is banking with Bank C. So somehow Bank Z and Bank C have to make a deal, right? Firstly of all, the finance company is transferring deposits over to the other bank, right? So these deposits go down, these deposits are destroyed. Here newly deposits are created for Lily. But now Bank C says, well, we increased our liabilities. We want to get a matching asset now from Bank Z. Bank Z also has something we need to settle. And again, they settle via ESF. So their ESF here goes up. Their ESF goes down. And we've got here now too Z ESF minus, Bank C ESF plus. And now we are finally finished. So now what happened in the end? In the end, what happened is I was the surplus unit. I was the one who was willing to really save. Right? I used my own equity. I used my own bank deposits to give it to somebody else. But I didn't give it to Lily directly. I gave my savings to the finance company, by buying that bond, by buying the commercial paper, and the finance company didn't keep my savings or my deposits. They further gave it then to Lilly, and Lilly is the final deficit spending unit here. Right? So why do we make such a big hoo-ha about the whole thing? You have to be careful that you don't believe now that I gave Lilly my bank deposits, even though in the end my bank deposits went down, Lilly bank deposits went up. Because what really happened here is the following. So we're not talking about bank B, C, and Z anymore. We just look at financial markets and intermediaries. Remember, we want to distinguish between financial markets, intermediaries, direct and indirect finance. So there's no direct contract between Lilly and me, so it's clearly already indirect finance. And also we had a financial intermediary involved here, but we also have the financial market involved. So the relationship between Axel, me, and the financial intermediary was, I bought that commercial paper, I bought the bond off them. I paid with my bank deposits. Between non-banks, payments and settlement can happen with bank deposits. So we are done already. That part is done. As soon as I transfer my bank deposits over, I get the bond, we are done. The financial intermediary didn't keep it, my deposit, but gave a loan to Lilly, so basically they lent the bank deposits to Lilly here, and therefore they received a financial instrument, a new contract, a new loan from Lilly. Right? So deposits went this way to Lilly, but there was a financial contract where Lilly says, I promise to repay you in the future. That is this one, that's that. And what we have here is we basically channeled funds over from Axel to Lilly. Far so good. Let's see on this timing. Ish. Good, so what do we have here? Same as beforehand, right? So the surplus unit, that was me. My bank deposits went down. The deficit unit, that's Lilly. Deposits went up. For the finance company, it was just going through. Deposits up, deposits down. Right? Deposits in, deposits out. That was just going through for the finance company, so it's transit through the finance company. What else do we have here interesting? We had two financial instruments, or two contracts. We had the bond contract between me and the finance company, and that is going via financial markets. And is this one here direct or indirect? This part. That part by itself is direct, right? But remember, when we want to distinguish the overall direct and indirect finance, the definition of direct finance is that money needs to flow directly from whom to whom. Deficit and spending unit. And there is no direct connection between the deficit and the spending unit. I don't have a contract with the Lilly. There's two financial contracts. Remember also we said with direct finance we only want to have one financial contract. Here we've got in the end two financial contracts, and that makes the whole thing indirect finance. Good, I think that's enough to tickle out of this one. That was if we do it via a financial intermediary, and now we do the same game with the bank and we see it's slightly different. So let's see what we have here. A bank is issuing a financial instrument and invests in financial instrument of a non-customer. Let's see. We've got this bank here. I like to give them names and it's always easier. Let's call this one bank B. And is issuing a financial instrument, we don't say to whom, investing in financial instruments of non-customers. So there's another bank involved here too. That might be bank B. Scratch your head, maybe talk to your neighbor. Why did I know that I have to write bank B to this one, if I talk about this part here. How do I know that this one is this bank and not this one? Let's try to suss that out with me. If it says investing in instrument of a non-customer. In fact, I can see a little bit more too. I shouldn't have brought that back here, sorry. So this is of course a different bank. It's called A, B, C. That can't be bank B. So for that one. Now I do know that this one is investing in this one. I forgot how to ask the question. So by looking at this picture here, we can figure out where the different customers and different people are sitting. So let's start with this one. The ADI is issuing an instrument. So we have to look at the whole picture and see who's issuing an instrument, and we can see here there's a plus. So that's the issuing of the instrument. Step one. Step two, now they have to sell that instrument, of course, to somebody, right? So they need to receive something in return. And now we have to figure out, do they receive something from their own customers, or do they receive something from a customer at a different bank? How can we see that? To make it simple, does it show here that I do anything with my own customers? No, right? So it's not my own customers, and that fits with here, non-customers with an S, right? So it must be either this is the counter transaction or this one. So if this bank is issuing commercial papers, the other side that is receiving these papers, are they getting deposits or paying with deposits? Paying. So we need to look for somebody that has minus deposits here, and that is here. So these two transactions belong together. Right? So I give these names again too. Let's say this is me, the saver, and this is Lily, just as beforehand, right? So I'm buying the bonds. Now somebody suggested beforehand in the break I should always make all the balance sheets, but it's getting a bit packed here if I do. But I just indicate if you want to do the balance sheet for Axel, you could do that too, and you can say buying the bonds and losing the deposit. That would be just here on the asset side is swap, right? Getting bonds in, but deposits out. Good, so I get to see this one here. Then, as usual, if Bank B and Bank A want to settle with each other, so in this case here, it is such that I transferred something over to Bank B, so that means my bank is owing something to Bank B, and they settle via, just say it loud for yourselves, then I can hear that you're not asleep, ESF. Thank you, right? So that ESF is going down, this ESF is going up. So we're talking about this part, plus. So that's a step one. ADA issued instruments, and so that's up to here. Issued instruments to non-customer. This is one. Let's change the colors. Now we go towards two. Invest in instrument of a non-customer. So they're investing somehow. That means that they are buying something. In this example here, they turned out to buy bonds. So on the investment here, let's make that violet. And number two, they bought bonds. Now they have to pay for these bonds somehow. By the way, the bonds are from Lily. We don't know exactly if Lily is issuing the bonds or if he's selling the bonds. It doesn't matter for us. Anyway, somehow bonds need to rock up on Lily's balance sheet too if you want to do it. What else do we have here? So if they're buying bonds, they have to pay for these bonds somehow. They pay Lily, who is a non-customer now, by transferring something. So they're indicating we want Lily's bank deposits to go up. But that is at Bank C. And Bank C is not simply raising Lily's bank deposits, they want something too. They're not saying, okay, we owe our customer more money. They want something from Bank B as well. And as usual, Bank B and Bank C are settling with ESF. So ESF is flowing from Bank B to Bank C, and Bank C therefore also acknowledges, okay, we now owe Lily more deposits. We increase her deposit account. And again, now we're finished, but if we make a different, so this is the accounting side. Let's look over on the picture side. And the picture side, even though we kind of do the same thing as before, and the picture looks quite different. So we have a similar thing to beforehand. Why is that financial intermediary sitting here? Okay, the financial intermediary this time is a bank, right? So here. Bank. That's the important one. So the bank was issuing a commercial paper to me, just as beforehand. And now there's one different thing here. Remember beforehand, bank deposits kind of were flowing through to the deficit unit. Now we might say that bank deposits here are destroyed while they're newly created here, because we had two different banks involved in this thing too. Right? Before and on the financial intermediary, they're collecting bank deposits and they give it away. Now we have two different banks involved, and with the two different banks, the liability of this bank with me is going down. This means by destroyed deposits here. By the liability for Lily's bank is going up because they're increasing Lily's deposits. What else do we have in here that I wanted? So maybe we should give the bank's names again. This one here is Bank A. This one was Bank. Oh, careful. Sorry. So the bank that was acting here as an intermediary was Bank B, was doing the issuing of the commercial papers. Bank B. Lily's bank was Bank C, thank you. What's up here? Bank C. And that leaves this one with Bank A, my bank. Okay, so we have two financial contracts involved in here. So again, we can say it's indirect finance, and we have the financial market involved here twice because we've got two securities that are traded, the bonds of Lily and the commercial paper that the bank issued. What else do we have here? And we have the central bank settlement between all three different banks, right? Between Bank A and B we had settlement, and between Bank B and C we had settlement as well. Ooh, that's getting quite a mouthful, I've got a feeling. So what else do we have here? This one here, I want to emphasize. So if the banks themselves are the intermediaries, we don't want to say that bank deposits are flowing through the bank system, because in this example here, for the bank, the deposits were always a liability. Remember, for banks, deposits always a liability. While for the finance company, the banks were a deposit. That makes it the difference. So here we might argue, here the finance company gave its deposits to somebody else. But if we have no finance company involved in here, it's the wrong way to think of that one as flowing deposits through the markets. So basically it's cleaner to think of it, my deposits were going down, my bank destroyed my deposits, and Lily's bank created a new deposit. for a limit. Good. So it's getting late, and I've got a feeling it's getting a bit exhausting too, right? How do you feel? Are you fully onto it yet? Then you can say yes. Or if you're a bit exhausted, you can say no, I'm exhausted. Who's exhausted? Arms up. Are you also fit still? I've got a feeling nobody wants to raise their hand. So the reason why I want to ask is Bitcoin is a bit more exciting. I'm wondering if you should go a bit quicker here or jump over these things. Let me see how much I've got here. Ooh, I've got quite a bit still. I know how to do it. So, I'll do the following. Because my gut feeling is your capacity to take in more of these balance sheets is finished. I've got the feeling you're full. If I was a student now, I would be finished with that stuff too. So what we do is you should look over these, try for yourself, and the first 10-15 minutes of the next class, I will go over them faster next time, okay? Because I've got a feeling it's just going in here or there. I'm trying to do that more. I just want to point out one thing here. Net creation of bank deposits. Remember, if I'm going to the bank, my bank, and I ask for a loan, they simply say, okay, you get a loan for Axel, 100, and that means we increase your deposit account by 100. So banks can create new deposits. That's the message here. And they don't need any cash for it. They don't need any central bank money for it. They just need a computer. They just need to believe in me. They press a button, and there's newly created deposits here. And we can see that in the real numbers too, so it's not just theory, right? Plus, it's not only theory. If you go to the bank tomorrow and ask them for a loan and they say yes, that's exactly what they do. Right? They're not saying, wait a second, we have to count on our money. They also don't say, wait a second, we have to collect money from somewhere else first. They just check if they believe you, and if they do, they put it straight on your deposit account. Just crank that number up. We can see that here too. So current account deposits increase in Australia by a lot, and they increase most of the time, which is totally normal. Banks just create more deposits, more loans. Are these limits? Are there any limits to deposit creation? Right. So you might wonder, well, why don't they just create infinite amount of deposits? And potentially, in a break, somebody asked me a question: what happens with inflation? If we have so much money, that should cause too much inflation. Right? And the answer here is banks are limited by certain things with the deposit creation. Number one, if I'm going to the bank as a lecturer at UQ and say, I want a $10 million mortgage, please. What do you reckon they're going to say? I don't get offended. Say your honest opinion. Most likely they're going to say no to me, right? Because they don't believe that I can repay and service the $10 million mortgage. And I think they're right as well. So it's good that they didn't give me the money, right? So it's banks' jobs to screen projects. They should create new deposits only for really worthwhile projects. If there's a project, a company that has a really fantastic idea to produce lots of new goods and services that are very valuable, most likely they can repay the loan. So we can create a new deposit. And here was a question before with inflation. If you create more and more money, that can cause inflation, right? Because people go shopping with that money, prices go up. But if you create more and more money for really good ideas that also create more and more goods, what's happening to the balance between money and goods? It stays the same. We just have economic growth. Right? So if banks are doing their job properly and finance only successful or likely successful projects, we don't have inflation, we just have economic growth. What happens though if banks are giving out more and more mortgages and deposits, not for new products, but for people to buy existing homes? So if you don't get more and more products, but just more and more money, what happens to enterprises? Inflation. And in my example, I picked that on purpose. So if the banks are giving out more and more money, not for car loans or consumer loans, but for mortgages, and people don't build more houses, but just bid for existing houses, what's happening to house prices? inflation, and we call that asset inflation or house price bubble. I'm not putting my hand into the fire to say that Australia is sitting on a house price bubble, but lots of people say that they do. And if you look at banks' balance sheets in Australia and what their main loans are, turns out to be mortgages. So the IMF and the OECD are not very happy with Australian banks because they are very heavy in mortgages. And if you put one and one together, might look a little bit like a warning sign. Good, so one thing is you need to have good projects to finance. Another thing is that what we do in future classes is there is some regulation that is restricting banks. Banks are not allowed to have infinite amount of loans if they don't have enough equity on the other side of the balance sheet. Also, banks always need to have a certain amount of ESF, basically, reserves as well. And we do that in future classes when we talk about liquidity risk in banks, and we go into these limits. Good. Monetary policy, due to time reason, skip it totally. We do that later anyway. I want to do a little bit these things here with you. How do I do that best? Very quickly. Come on. Desktop. Ooh. So Bitcoin, I'm quite sure most of you have heard of Bitcoin beforehand. Very exciting. Just to give you a little bit of feeling how exciting that is, let's take the last 30 days. I hope that's long enough. Come on. That doesn't look like 30 days. I want to get much bigger numbers. There, that looks much better. So depending on what time frame you're looking at, look at this one. Bitcoin here, almost $20,000. Then $7,000. And now again, $10,000. Look at the time frame. End of last year, beginning of February. So the time frame is very short. But this is not the reason why people are so excited about Bitcoin, right? People are so excited about Bitcoin because of this one. Right? So some of you might have had friends that mid last year were investing in Bitcoins, or let's say, for example, if you had a class of mine, semester 2, yes, that's around this time here. So in semester 2, I'm teaching another class where I'm saying, well, Bitcoin is a bubble, right? Bitcoin price is way too high. And I will argue something similar today too. And some students, of course, didn't listen to me because they know everything better. And it turns out, well, they actually did quite well, right? Because Bitcoins went up to 20,000. Most economists say it's a bubble. Now, what is Bitcoin? So first of all, this is the reason why people are so excited, right? Lots of people got on paper very rich very fast. Lots of people lost half of their money within 2 months as well, right? Very, very volatile, very exciting. So, where are my slides? Here. No. So a little bit background of Bitcoin. So what?
Imagine Wall Street. Every day, millions of people invest in commodities such as gold or...
At a very basic level, Bitcoin is just a digital file or ledger that contains names and balances, and people exchange money by changing this file. When Bob sells Carol a lawnmower for 5.2 Bitcoins, Bob's balance goes up by 5.2 and Carol's down by 5.2. There's no gold or government-issued money backing these numbers. Bob is only willing to trade his real-life lawnmower.
So look at this one. Looks familiar? We've got a balance sheet here or a ledger, and we just push numbers around, and thereby Bob and Carol can settle for the lawnmower. Looks like a bank. Looks like bank deposits, and that's the reason why people are saying Bitcoin is like a deposit or like fiat money, like cash. That's the reason why some people argue that Bitcoin is money, right? Because I can just push numbers around to pay somebody, settle with somebody.
There's no gold or government-issued money backing these numbers. Bob is only willing to trade his real-life lawnmower for a higher number in this digital file because he has faith that other people will also trust the system. So who maintains this ledger and makes sure no one cheats? One goal of Bitcoin is to avoid any centralized control, so every participant maintains their own copy of the ledger. One surprising consequence of this is that everyone can see everyone else's balances, although the real system only uses account numbers and not names, so there's some level of anonymity. If everyone maintains their own ledger, how are all the ledgers kept in sync as money is transferred? At a basic level, when you want to send money, you simply tell everyone else by broadcasting a message with your account number, the receivers, and the amount. Everyone across the entire world then updates their ledger. As a quick aside, I'm describing how Bitcoin works for power users, people who help maintain the system. You can also just use the system to send and receive money, though, without maintaining a ledger. If sending money is as simple as creating a message with some account numbers, what's to stop a thief, Alice, from spending Bob's money by using his account number? Like a pen and paper check, Bitcoin requires a kind of signature to prove that the sender is the real owner of an account, but it's based on math rather than handwriting. When a new account number is created, it comes along with a private key mathematically linked to that account number. If you've heard of a Bitcoin wallet, these keys are what it holds and are what allow you to create signatures. To create a signature, a private key and the text from a transaction are fed into a special cryptographic function. Another function allows other people to check the signature, making sure it was created by the account owner and that it applies to that specific transaction. Unlike the handwritten version, these signatures can't be copied and reused in the future, as they're unique to each transaction. While the mathematical signatures prove who sent a transaction, they can't prove when it was sent, and this turns out to be problematic. In our traditional banking system, if Alice wrote 2 checks but only had enough money to cover one of them, the bank would pay the first person attempting to cash his check but refuse the second because Alice's account would be empty. So the order of these checks is critical because it determines who should get paid. Unfortunately, order is much harder to determine in Bitcoin, where instead of a single bank, there are individuals all over the world. Network delays might cause transactions to arrive in different orders in different places, and fraudsters could lie about timestamps. 2 recipients might both think their transaction is first and ship a product, effectively allowing Alice to spend money twice. Bitcoin prevents this by providing a way for the entire world to decide on transaction order. As new transactions are created, they go into a pool of pending transactions, and from here they'll be sorted into a giant chain that locks in their order. To select which transaction is next, a kind of mathematical lottery is held. Participants select a pending transaction of their choice and begin trying to solve a special problem that will link it to the end of the chain. The first person to find a solution wins and gets to have their transaction selected as next in the chain. So,
this is, by the way, very important and one of the critiques of Bitcoin. There's not only one guy trying to solve that problem, there's lots of people trying to solve that problem. Right? And if you have one problem and lots of people try to solve it, but they don't work together, does that sound like a good use of time? No, right? Because one is getting reimbursed, that was a useful time, all their time or energy or computer power, pure waste. And it turns out there's quite a lot of waste with Bitcoin.
this linking problem. It's based on a special function called a cryptographic hash. As scary as this sounds, it just mixes up its inputs and spits out a number, but it's special because it's irreversible. There's no easy way to start with an output and then find an input that generates it other than by making lots of guesses. And this is literally what people are doing in Bitcoin, feeding this function random numbers until the output meets certain criteria. Besides a random guess, you also input a transaction from the pending pool and chain, which is where the linking part comes in. So the lottery provides a way for the entire world to decide which transaction is next, but the math behind it also helps ensure everyone agrees about past transactions too. Suppose you're joining the network for the first time and request a copy of the transaction chain to get caught up but receive several different versions. Which one should you trust? Ideally, you would trust the one that the majority of people are using, but determining this on the internet is difficult. What would stop a single person from voting millions of times? Bitcoin prevents this by requiring people to solve math problems to vote. This causes each vote to have a cost in computing power, making it unlikely that a single person or group could ever afford to outvote or outcompute the majority of users. The transaction ordering process described before actually provides the voting system. Part of the input to the linking problem is a transaction from the end of a chain, so each guess is effectively a vote for that chain. But how are all the votes tallied? Because the cryptographic hash function has well-defined statistical properties, you can look at any given answer and estimate how many guesses it took to find it, just like estimating how many coin flips it would take to get 100 heads in a row. So the links in a chain not only put transactions in order, but also act as an effective vote tally, making it easy to see which chain most people are using. Finally, how does money get created? Every time someone wins the lottery to pick the next transaction in the chain, new bitcoins are created out of thin air and awarded to their account. Solving these problems is commonly called mining, as this is how money enters the system, but the main purpose of the math is to make sure everyone's ledgers agree. The math simply provides a convenient way to randomly distribute money into the world. In fact, sometime around 2140, no more money will be created, and participants will only be paid from fees added onto transactions. I hope this gives you a quick sense for how Bitcoin works.
So that's the basic idea behind Bitcoin, just in case if you haven't seen that beforehand. And now the important part here is people are excited about Bitcoin. Sorry, just give me 2 or 3 more minutes. So people often say it's a digital currency, it's money, right? Let's check if it's in economic terms really money. So money needs to have certain functions. Number one function is, of course, we need to be able to settle our payments with money, widely accepted. Now, do you think Bitcoin is widely accepted? Anything on campus that you can buy with Bitcoin? I'm not aware of it. There might be 1 or 2 coffee shops, but not really. If you look at the internet, it will say Dell is accepting Bitcoin. It will say Microsoft is accepting Bitcoin. And I've Googled that and checked the background behind that one. They're not actually accepting Bitcoin. What they're doing is they're saying, here's a link. Our product costs $500 US. That's currently equivalent to X amount of Bitcoins. You click on the link, it sends you somewhere where you pay with Bitcoin, but really what you do is you pay an exchange with Bitcoin, they give you dollars, you don't realize that, and the dollars go to Microsoft. So Microsoft has nothing to do with Bitcoin, similar with Dell. And by the way, there's lots of people complaining that even that doesn't properly work with Java. So there's very few places that accept payments in Bitcoin. One exception apparently is illegals and trucks, right? So they're pretty big on Bitcoin, for sure, hold on. Stable value is very important, right? So if you have money in your wallet, you want to know that you can buy a certain amount of it. For example, if I'm going shopping, I want to know, well, I've got $100, I usually get a shopping basket full. I don't want to go to the shops with $100 and think like, okay, if I'm lucky, I get 10 shopping baskets, but if I'm unlucky, I get only banana today, right? And that's exactly what happens with Bitcoin. Remember the Bitcoin price, $20,000, $10,000, $6,000, $15,000? Right, so you don't know for sure how much you get next week if you go shopping with Bitcoin. And the last one is unit of account. So we use it to measure how much is something worth. Right? If you say my car is worth $20,000, everybody knows what you mean. If you say my car is worth 1 Bitcoin, what do you mean? 1 Bitcoin in December, or 1 Bitcoin in November, or 1 Bitcoin in February? It would be a totally different thing. Right? So I reckon it's not money at all, nowhere near, my personal opinion. Then lots of people are super excited still about Bitcoin. They say lots of people in the future will accept it as payment. Maybe, I'm not so sure. They say it's super fast payment. It takes around 20 minutes nowadays if you transfer with Bitcoin so that the new blockchain is generated, right? In Australia, 2 days on your bank account sounds much slower. But anybody heard of the new payment platform? Seconds, right? Step 1. Step 2, if you're abroad, if you want to transfer money abroad, it usually takes a long time, right? Do you think banks don't have a technology to do it fast? I'll give you a hint. Anybody ever been overseas and get to an ATM? How long do you have to wait in front of an ATM before the ATM knows how much is on your bank account worldwide? Seconds. So banks already have the technology to figure out anywhere in the world how much money is on your account across different banks. They were just up to now too lazy to use it for your bank transfer. Because what they're doing is, sure, we can transfer your money to the UK, you just give it to us, we keep it for a week, and then we give it to them, right? That was because they were lazy, not because they can't do it. So the banks already have the technology to do it, not in 20 minutes, to do it in seconds. And that will come fast. In Europe, it's already there. They say it's anonymous, not so sure. They say low fees. Currently, the fees on Bitcoin, I think, are not very high, but how much fees do you pay? If anybody of you is transferring money to me, how much fees do you have to pay for a bank account? None. It's for free. Currently, it might be a little bit of a fee if you do it internationally. Once Bitcoin is getting bigger, I swear my hand on it, banks will just cancel the fees. Right? If there's enough competition, they'll slow down the fees. Limited supply. This is one of my favorites, right? There's only going to be 21 million of these things in the world. Surely, therefore, it's gaining in value. Now, if you look at the amount of hair I've got, I promise you I've got much less than 21 million hairs. And I'm not going to produce any more in the future either. Does that mean you should pay $20,000 for one of my hairs? No. Can it be copied? Can anybody produce the same hair as I do? No. It's my DNA. It doesn't mean it needs to be worth anything. There's a lot of stupid things that can't be supplied in infinite amount. It doesn't mean it's going to be valuable, right? If you can't use it for something useful, it's not going to be valuable. Lots of people say, well, Australian dollars, that's just paper money. Bank deposits, just traded with the press of a button, that's not valuable. That's just fiat money, it's just a belief system. But there's one major difference to Bitcoin. If you have to pay taxes in Australia, and you do have to pay taxes, otherwise you go to jail, the only thing that the Australian government wants to see is Australian money. You can't pay with US dollars, you can't pay with cars, you can't pay with cows, you can't pay with Bitcoin. So there's always some value in Australian dollars. There's always some value in US dollars because somebody needs that to pay their taxes to avoid to go to jail. That will never happen with Bitcoin. You never go to jail because you have too few Bitcoins and can't pay your tax. So it's my personal opinion again. Difference. Actually, not only my opinion. So if you look a little bit deeper, actually into these links here. So what I can recommend is Paul Fighters reading. So that's a fairly good one. And even if you look at the celebrities, so we've got here Warren Buffett, very pessimistic. But what I enjoyed a lot, Elon Musk. You would think that Elon Musk loves technology. Listen exactly what he says about that one. Richard Branson is the kicker in this one. I'll just give this away and then I'll leave it to you. So he's accepting Bitcoins for his SpaceX flying to outer space. He's saying, yes, we accept Bitcoins. And then in the very next sentence he says, I'm not saying that we keep them. So what is he doing? He's just accepting the equivalent of the US dollar value of Bitcoin and he sells them, of course. Because what he wants to have is US dollars. So if you're interested in Bitcoin, if you're all hot stuff about Bitcoin, I think it might make sense to look a little bit at the negative or positive risks here. Now, I'm not saying that you should totally stay away. Well, I would totally stay away from Bitcoin, to be honest, right? But yeah, you might have friends that got rich with Bitcoin. You might have friends that doubled their money with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is very volatile. So if you want to have fun and gamble, not because you want to get rich, but you want to have something exciting in your life, feel free to go with Bitcoin. Because it's for sure not going to be boring. It's going to go up a lot, or in my opinion, it's going to go down a lot. For sure, it's going to be exciting, right? But if you want to invest your lifetime in investment in here, if you want to get your parents' money, if you want to borrow money to invest in Bitcoin to get rich, it might be worth to think through a little bit of the things that I told you here and look at the links, just in case you see a negative attitude.